Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the EFL Fantasy Podcast. My name is Angus,
My name is Dan.
and Jamie can't be with us this evening, so it's just the two of us here to look back at most of Game Week 15. We are recording on Monday night, so obviously the Rotherham Ipswich game is still to go. So obviously, when the Ipswich forwards have scored like 5 goals, that will obviously feel very, very different about our game weeks. But yeah, first things first, Dan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Um, Good result for Luton. Could have been better if we'd hung on for about 3 more minutes, but yeah, I'm good. Very weird fantasy game week
Yeah.
in FPL and Gaffr. So yeah, I'm not sure what to make of it, but I think it's one of those where you just no rash decisions and try and gather as much information as you can. But yeah, good game week.
Yeah,
Luton anyway.
strange game week. Obviously, we'll get into our scores in a moment. We will then sort of go through the team news from the weekend. We will cover a couple of key points and get into the boosts. So in terms of this game week, I I've had an interesting game week. So I'm on 53 -4. I'm on Goalfest. The two players I sold this week for Goalfest, Jorginho Rutter and Sammy Smodics, who have 3 goals. My entire team has one. But
That was like last minute as
yeah,
well, wasn't it?
it was Sarah
The
who I brought
Norwich.
in for
Yeah.
Smodics. To be fair, I stand by the decision. Smodics was doubtful, particularly on Goalfest. You need to have sort of all of your attackers playing, even if they're on the bench. So I went for Sarah, who did obviously grab the goal. No one else in my team has got a goal so far. Um, but little bits and pieces from the rest of the team. So I had O'Leary 6. That was a nice one. Ranking Costello 6. Eventful game for him. An assist, first half clean sheet, booked, and then came off injured. Uh, Walker Peters 9. Leaf Davis captain, which is sitting there at the moment with 2. Somerville 2, Dewsbury Hall 2. Obviously, we'll cover it in a bit, but that could have been very different with both of those players, actually. Sarah 12, because obviously the extra 5 for Goalfest. Clark 7, Hugill 2, Broadhead vice captain 3, Chaplin 2. I also have Humes 9 on the bench, and Collins 8. Both of who, well, no, Hume would have been on Park the Bus if I had played that. Collins wouldn't. I would have sold him for Brandon Williams, who was a no-show. So not disastrous there, to be honest. So yeah, 53 -4. It's a red arrow, but I'm just happy because until sort of the 91st minute of the Sunday game or whatever it was, my Goalfest was on 0 goals. At least I'm on one now. It would have just been quite spectacular to have a 0 point boost. At least that's 1 goal. But yeah, so red arrow, and hoping for something big in Rotherham Ipswich. How did your game week go?
So I got 41 so far. I done Johansson and Chaplin in for Pledecki and Piero. Part of my thinking is I know I've been a big advocate for Piero, but just all the bonus and the data just Rutter's just smashing him on everything. Like he doesn't even if he didn't score, he probably would have got in the bonus the other night. So like yourself, I captain Davis, vice captain Broadhead. Johansson was actually got 5 points. That wasn't terrible. Ranking Costello 6, De Silva 1, Somerville 2, it was Isaiah Jones 2, Dewsbury Hall 2, Clark 7, Adam Armstrong 9, and Chaplin 2. I think I've got about a 20 place red arrow down to 73rd. Um, I'm not even sure how much I would improve if the Ipswich lot did well, because a lot of them captained or
There's
vice
triple
captained by
triples
players.
as well out there as well. Like,
Yeah, so do you know what? It might be funny. I might need like a Johansson pen save, and for it to be 0-0 for me to actually
Johansson pen
climb back
save
up.
from Broadheads. Like,
Yeah, he then taps in the rebound.
yeah. Um,
But yeah, not a great, just a really funny week. Like I don't think
yeah.
my team's that bad. Just
No,
didn't score any points.
it's like, yeah. I sort of look at it, reading that team out, and it's sort of like, yeah, just, no complaints there and everything. Like, but yeah, so that's the game weeks. We'll go straight into actually the key team news, Dan. So if you just take that away.
Yes, sure. So Leicester, Pereira, and Faz were recalled to the starting lineup. West Brom, Furlong, Townsend, and Thomas Asante all started. Sunderland, is it Rusling, the striker, started up front again. Rotherham, Odoffin started at centre back. Um, we were trying to figure out which players weren't in the video they released, and I was sort of right. It was Fred Onyedinma, but he did play anyway with a cold. QPR, obviously new manager in. Um, It looks like a 4-2-3-1. Probably the biggest news is Willock started, which he's one of your best players. He has to play every week if they've got a chance of staying up. Preston, Young Best was in the lineup. Coventry, Van Eyck was dropped to the bench. He started right and Godden up front. Um, for Plymouth, Wayne was up front. No Hardy. For Southampton, Bree kept his place again at left back. So obviously no Manning. Huddersfield, only 6 players on the bench. I looked at their lineup. Did it have 7, 8 defenders in Angus? We
Oh
were trying
yeah,
to
it was.
work out the lineup. It got a point though against Watford.
Yeah,
For Birmingham, Laird was back in at right back. Drame moved to left back, and Stansfield and Myoshis were back in the starting lineup. Ipswich, you mentioned about Brandon Williams not in the squad. So I think that was illness.
yeah,
So Clark played right back. For Norwich, young Warner started at centre back. Hernandez and Nunez were also in the lineup. And for Blackburn, Costello started at right back with Britton at right wing. That's your key news.
yes. Obviously, quite a bit going on there. I think there's a few that will have sort of affected people. A few sort of surprises. I think we'd worked out by the deadline that the players missing were, for example, the Rotherham players were Onyedinma and Peltier. Um, and then Onyedinma has played through illness. They're going to assess him ahead of the Tuesday night game. Same with Williams. So it sounds like Peltier won't play either, but we'll see how that goes. So anyone who's on Peltier, you've ended up quite unlucky, really. Um, and obviously the Smodix thing, it can happen. That I don't sort of believe. I think he was doubtful. Thomason has been quite upfront with all the injury news this season. I don't think he was sort of making it up. He's just ended up being able to play. Such is life. Um, but yeah, so that's that. So we'll get into our first point, which is to talk about the Friday night game, which was Leeds Leicester, or Leicester-Leeds. Um, I really enjoyed this game. I thought it was a lot of fun. It's a great way to kick off the weekend, and particularly up against no Premier League football. It was one of those ones. I mean, obviously it's Leicester Leeds. They were both in the Premier League last season, but I think it was one of those things where, because they're two teams that are a bit different this year to last year, I saw some people getting eyeballs on them for the first time. Um, and And yeah, it was interesting. I think Leicester will not quite consider themselves unfortunate, but will sort of look at it and say they possibly should have done a bit more with the moments they had in the game. I mean, Dewsbury Hall obviously has the header saved brilliantly by Meslier at the end. And credit to him because he basically had nothing to do. And he's come up with a really big save there. Fatawu obviously hit the bar. I was wrong in that at half time, I thought Sam Byram was slightly lucky to still be on the pitch. And if he stayed on, he'd get sent off. Uh, Fatawu was having some real joy against him. He'd been booked. There was at least one where he could have been booked as well. Um, and so I thought it was going to be a real problem, but he ended up fine. And yeah, but Leeds, there'd been a lot of talk beforehand that Leeds were well suited to give Leicester trouble. And I think we saw that a bit, didn't we? In terms of particularly the way they could hit them on the counter.
I wasn't lucky enough to watch this live. I went to a fireworks show. I got back just as Rutter scored, so I had a different perspective. But obviously, I did watch the highlights later, and I think we've mentioned before that Leeds' front four are probably the best front four, especially when they can counter attack. And yeah, I think we're starting to see. I think three of the four are Piero, Rutter, and Somerville. I think the Dan James role will rotate. Probably Nonto's probably the one who will probably come in now more often than not. And yeah, we've mentioned numerous times, but for me, you've got to have two of the Leeds attackers. I think it's blatantly obvious. And the two best ones are probably Somerville and Rutter. Although Piero had a few more shots in this than he has over recent weeks. It seemed, or from the key highlights anyway. Um, so obviously, with me selling Piero, I was um, obviously glad he didn't return at any point. But yeah, I've said for a few weeks now, and people think it's my anti-bias to Ipswich, but I think if Leeds are quite capable of winning a lot of points very quickly, and I think they're the most likely to stop Leicester or Ipswich getting into the top two. Um, Apart from those two, would you get any leads in defence?
As much as I've slagged him off, I think Sam Byram is an option. And this is not the Luke Ayling thing. I actually like Sam Byram is a different sort of thing. I think his end product is actually quite bad. He's done a solid job for them. He's filled in when they've really needed someone to do a job in there. But I think his end product is limited. But he's another one who gets into these positions, and so there is a chance of a return just because he's up there, involved, supporting. So I think he's probably the one I would go for if I were looking at them. Um, I sold Rutter. It was a 1 week move. I decided about a third of the way through the game. I hated the fact that I'd even gone without it for 1 week. I've been out here banging the Rutter drum. Hopped off him for 1 week. He sort of scored a tap in. A header that came off Sam Byram's shoulder that falls to him. But yeah, him and Somerville. I mean, Somerville. What he was doing, he then lost his mind just as he was about to be taken off in an altercation with Hamza Chowdhury, which Hamza Chowdhury seemed to be completely baffled by, like what was going on. Somerville just decided to be
He
offended
just
by
picked him
Hamza
up and threw
Chowdhury.
him. Picked him up and threw him, did he?
It's just the most bizarre thing. Um, And
Anything to worry about with Leicester, or do you just think it's two good sides playing against each other?
I think it's just two good sides. I think we talked about uh or I mentioned sort of like Leeds being well equipped to hurt Leicester. I think if you can get them in the transition, particularly the way they're set up, whoever it is on that right hand side, and it's not to sort of criticise Fast because I think he's a good player, but just whoever is on the right hand side there, when it was if they were going to be able to get Somerville in particular one on one with that player, it was going to be a problem for Leicester, and that happened a few times. But I just think, yeah, it's one of those things. It can go either way. It's two of the best teams in the division. There won't be many teams with the players equipped with the players to hurt Leicester. I mean, you look at them. Fatawu hits the bar. Dewsbury Hall has that chance that very nearly goes in, and then we're having a different conversation almost. Um, so yeah, I don't think there's too much concern. I think some of their players you sort of look at, and it's like, how many of these do you want in Gaffr terms, in particular with Leicester? Um, but you've still got some decent options in attack. Defensively, they're fine, but you're probably not getting much more than say clean sheets from them. Um, I was just really impressed. I was really impressed by Leeds as well with the way they went about the game. I did say after the game I was all set to say, oh yeah, Glenn Kamara goes under the like he was great, but he's going to go under the radar. And then Sky gave him man of the match and gave him his own little highlights cut up. But no, I thought he was outstanding. I thought he settled in really well. I'm a big fan of him as a player. And I think he's stepped in really well, and I think he's helped Ampadu as well. It's not to say that like Archie Gray was a problem in there before, but I think the partnership they've already built up is sort of top draw for Leeds, and is really helping. It's really helping free up those attackers as well. They're not having to help out at all. They know that they can sort of look to attack, and they'll get the ball. So I think that's big for them. But yeah, any concerns for you on Leicester?
You know, I think we've seen pretty all season they can be hit on the counter, but it's it's very rarely teams will be able to do that continuously throughout the game, and probably only Ipswich and Southampton can probably only do that as well, I'd say.
Yeah, so I think that they're probably all right. So yes, that's that game really, and obviously, I think I can't remember what we said in terms of top six predictions. I think I said Leeds to finish top two, which is no slight on Ipswich. It's just seeing what
Yeah,
they're
you said
capable of.
Ipswich,
Did I say
Angus.
Ipswich? But I do think Leeds are the ones that could chase them down. I mean, I know someone like Southampton could, but I think Leeds are the most likely to go on a prolonged run, and really challenge them. Um, but yeah, so that's that game. In terms of anything else we want to raise from the game week, have you got anything else, Dan?
Um, I think we probably got to talk about Rotherham as they're part of the double. Um, I'm not sure how much the 1-1 draw is helpful for either Rotherham or QPR, but um, your man Bramall with the
Yes,
assist,
yes.
Angus, you've been plugged
I was going to
for
bring
a
that
few
up.
weeks. Oh, sorry, mate.
No, no, it's fine. If you like, it's as in if you didn't, I was, and like me running off to clip that.
Yeah, so that was good. It was interesting, obviously, with the new manager for QPR, that Chair back amongst the goals, a great goal as well. Powell with another assist. What's it? He's got 5 or 6 attacking returns this year.
Something like that.
So yeah, I'm not saying they're options, but with a new manager, you never know. Especially players like Chair and Willock, if they start scoring and assisting, there'll be options. Any points for you, Angus?
Just to piggyback off that slightly, you mentioned him at the end, Willock coming back in. There'd been a lot of talk about it with Ainsworth going, and I do think that was big for them. I was going to mention the Blackburn game. We talked about it a bit, but just
Yeah.
the two sides involved in this. So Blackburn, you have Smodics played. They capitalised on what was poor play from Norwich, but Smodics, Dolan, Rankin Costello was doing quite well until he went off with a hamstring injury. Thomason has said he's quite sort of concerned about it, I think, in terms of it potentially going for a while. But Dolan, Smodics, they in particular looked really good. We know with them they're going to be a bit hit and miss. Norwich, it's a problem. It's a real problem. I said on Sunday I wasn't sure that David Wagner would make it 24 hours. It has been confirmed he will be in charge for the game this weekend. The most alarming thing for me was the boos at half time were half-hearted. The fans almost couldn't be bothered to boo.
I mean, after the second goal went in, though, there was a massive boo, though, and it wasn't even full either,
No,
which I can't remember the last time I've seen Carrow Road not full.
the only time I remember a cheer was there was a cheer that went up when they had their first shot on target. Which Sarah in particular looked really annoyed in that game, and it reached a point late on in the game. He did get his goal, but where it actually looked like he just didn't want to give anyone else the ball. He would like that. He just in such a way that he was just like, well, you're not going to do anything with it anyway. Which our friend of the pod, Luke Irons, said something. He was going to ask a question for the pod. He didn't, but I'll discuss it here. Where he was sort of saying about the biggest gap in terms of how good a player is and how bad the team is they're playing on. And you, at the moment, you would probably say Sarah is probably the best example of that because they're so bad, but he's so good. Hwang up front. I was watching the game with Darren and Martin from the Man On podcast and FPL Frog, and we were talking about how he looked like a competition winner. He just wasn't very good. It was all bad. It's all bad there. I'm not sure what the positive is aside from Sarah. And I bought him this week, and I now have to look at him being in my team. Which,
Yeah, we've mentioned Sarah before, and as soon as he does anything, he ends up with bonus anyway, so it's
yeah,
not terrible. But I managed to watch this game before the Luton game, and um, I haven't seen a lot of Blackburn and Norwich recently, apart from like highlights and things like that. And I was really impressed with Blackburn, but Norwich just looked like 2 yards off. They're getting played round so easily, and it's too easy to score against them. And it was a red card for Blackburn, and it's lucky because that would have ended up 4, 5, or 6.
yeah,
Like I have no doubt about that.
yeah,
So Smodic's a good option, probably better option than I thought he was, to be honest.
yeah. No, I'm
And
I'm a little bit disappointed I haven't got him now, but the reasons I got rid, I'm still sort of comfortable with as
yeah,
well.
and for Norwich, they're a target team until they get a new manager in.
Yeah.
You have to target them.
Yeah, like
So
I'll probably
Cardiff
stick with
players.
Zara now that I've got him, but because he's different anyway. But otherwise, yeah, I'm looking at teams with fixtures against Norwich. We'll come on to the boosts. There's points where I'm looking at teams for like follow the leader with games against Norwich and being like that's a good game.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I just covered the only other
Ipswich.
thing I was going to cover, which was Plymouth Boro.
Yeah,
Uh, Obviously a high scoring game, but it was partially just the players who returned in this game that I wanted to comment on. So obviously for Plymouth, you've got Whitaker who got a goal. But the other ones that we've sort of talked about at times, Barley Mumba and Finn Azaz, who
Yeah,
obviously went big in this game. And I think particularly when people are looking towards things like follow the leader, they're the sort of players that are going to come into the reckoning, particularly if you already have someone like Whitaker or are looking to get him back if you sold. Something like when they have a decent home game, you don't want them in a away game, but when they have a decent home game, Mumba, Azaz, Whitaker, that's going to be a decent option on follow the leader, I think. And someone like Azaz
even
on Budget
Budget
Buster as
Buster.
well.
Yeah,
Azaz and Whitaker, obviously. Mumba doesn't qualify for that, and Cooper obviously saved a penalty in this game. Um, and then on the Borough side, you've got Engel, who's progressed quite a lot at left back, and Borough fans seem quite happy with him now. He's doing more and more to sort of minimise the effect of losing Ryan Giles. Obviously, it's going to be tough to fill those shoes, but the more he's doing, will help that. And then obviously we've talked about him numerous times in the past. Matt Crooks got another attacking return, just keeps ticking over. Um,
he's playing in the 10,
yeah,
Angus, is he?
yeah,
Yeah, see, I've not watched Borough for a while. When they were on TV, I think Luton were on at the same time, so I've
yeah.
watched highlights, but obviously you don't get a full um, understanding of what's going on. What about Vanderberg at right back? Any because he's
I don't
cheated ill
think so. I think he'll only be handy to people like sort of
budget buster.
budget buster when it comes around. I don't think you necessarily want him for a prolonged run because he's naturally a centre back. So it's that same
Yeah,
sort of thing where he's a bit more conservative. It frees up Engel a bit more, and there's that
so
sort of
they
lopsided element.
he sort of goes to the three at the back.
Yeah. And then the other two in their team, one of whom is relevant for Budget Buster, one I don't think is. Sam Greenwood, we talked about him previously. He's obviously gone big again in this game. And Josh Coburn,
Yeah, I like Josh Coburn.
he's got 2 goals in this game. One of them is a rebound off him missing the penalty, which was a slight surprise that he took the penalty. We thought it was Johnny
How's
Howson, but Coburn took, saved, and he scored the rebound. But yeah, so that's some players from that game as well. I think that are going to be on radar for people. Obviously, you're not going to get Borough this weekend. They play Leicester, but I do think, particularly the likes of Greenwood and Coburn, is going to be a real interest. Engel might be worth watching. Like I say, that's another assist for him. Matt Crooks is budget buster eligible. But yeah, so I just thought, particularly with those two teams, the players that were returning made it interesting for me. Have you got anything else to cover?
just Birmingham Ipswich?
Yeah,
Um, was it the fourth game for Rooney?
yeah,
Obviously, go 2-0 up. It sort of looked like a better balanced side. I know Drame is normally a right back, but he can do it at left. And then he has to play Myoshi and Stansfield. He's got to play those two, doesn't he? Um, and they obviously went 2-0 up, and then Ipswich fought back, which is this the second time they've fought back from 2 goals? They beat Cardiff three
think
two,
so.
so that's a credit to them. Also interesting that none of the like their key players, they relied on their squad players like Harness and players like that. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I've got a funny feeling that we might see one of those key players benched. Um, you're not. I don't think you're quite as sure, but yeah. Can you really not start Harness when he's just scored 2 goals?
I
Seems
think
a bit
Harness
hard.
comes into the team, but I think he might be the only one.
Yeah, it's just whether someone like a Broadhead drops out. Because I'll be surprised if Chaplin does it in
Yeah,
the
my
10
my
role he
theory was it
plays.
might be Hurst, but also it could also be Hutchinson is the thing. Like,
Yeah, it could be. Yeah,
it could just be that straight swap. But yeah, it wasn't ideal for them, but obviously they got the result in the end.
And they're not obviously Ipswich play. They catch their game up in. I think it's tomorrow as we record,
Yeah,
and it is on TV as well. I think
I believe
so I'll
so.
be watching. Yeah, because I think it was originally a TV game, so they're allowed to show it still. I think.
Yes, yes, that sounds right.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Like I mentioned, for me to make any progress, I probably need the Johansson to go big. But yeah, I think that's it on key points. Oh, Millwall manager
Yes, we
just
don't know much
announced.
about him.
We don't know much about him, but yeah,
Um,
he got the position. It sounds like over Nathan Jones, so that's probably quite different styles of management. I would probably suggest, but I
yeah,
know you've been quite happy to see new managers get jobs. I don't think
yeah.
it was more aimed at Jones. It was
No, no,
more aimed at
not
like
specifically him.
Smith
Not
and
yeah. I
Warnock and
think
things like that.
I like seeing new managers given a go rather than the same names constantly. Like,
Yeah,
don't get me wrong, there's something sort of that warms your heart when you get to the part of the championship season where Neil Warnock gets hired. But the fact that a team didn't just go to Neil Warnock,
yeah.
didn't go to sort of Steve Bruce.
It's
Um,
before Christmas, isn't it?
yeah, so it's just like I like seeing different managers given a go. So that's sort of encouraging for me. It might not work, but at least go for something that might be really good rather than something that's probably just going to be solid. Go for something that might be really good rather than just
Yeah.
settling. So that's the encouraging
And
thing for
all
me.
we mentioned in our chat that although they might take maybe a step back this year, there's no threat of them going down or anything like that. So
No,
even if they drop to bottom half and then maybe he gets them playing how they want to play, and then next year they might actually push for the playoffs. And we've also seen in recent years that they're starting to spend a bit of money.
yeah,
Millwall, Fleming, Nisbet this year, signing some good loan players as well. Really,
yeah. So I think they'll be one to watch, but I think they seem to be heading in the right direction. Obviously, the tragic passing of the owner, but
yeah,
generally speaking, they seem to be heading in the right direction, which is obviously positive for them. So now we've got the part that everyone is tuned in for, which is the chat about the new set of boosts. Um, so we'll cover off some of them right away because we don't need to spend much time talking about them, which in some ways is quite handy, I think. Uh, Two of them we just had, which is midfield dynamos and overhaul. So overhaul, obviously, the wildcard, midfield dynamos, double points for all your midfielders. The other one that we don't really need to cover off because there's not much planning involved for it, and unless something goes horribly wrong, you probably shouldn't need to use it, is underhaul, which is a free hit. So that one's quite easy to explain, really. So that leaves three. Jeepers Keepers, Budget Buster, and Follow the Leader. I guess we'll start with Jeepers Keepers. It's probably the easiest one to explain. It's one of the most fun boosts. It's one of our favourites. This counts for both your keepers. Whereas you normally get 2 points for a half clean sheet, for your keeper on this boost, you'll get 4 points for each half clean sheet. You get 3 points per save, and you get 10 points per penalty saved. You can't captain keepers in this, although you do get your captains with this boost. You just can't captain the keepers for it. I guess you could, but you'd only get captaincy for the basic points, so you might as well captain someone else. So in terms of this boost, I guess just to briefly discuss it, because we're not going to talk about weeks for this one, just because it's very much how it falls with your particular keepers, and we're not going to go through the various different keepers you could have. One thing I will note before we get too far into this, because we will talk some fixtures. There's highly unlikely to be any doubles in this set of fixtures. So just to cover that now. People who have followed before know that the chaos really kicks in with the FA Cup fourth round in terms of the blank game week. That would clash with game week 29. So obviously it's very unlikely that those games would turn around and be rescheduled for game week 30. So you're looking at those games going into the third set of boosts. So barring weather, which obviously we can't rule out, it's winter. And I think there's another storm coming already. I don't know what silly name they'll have given this one, but I'm not in charge of naming storms. Barring that, there won't be any double game weeks, I think is the important thing to cover off. But in terms of Jeepers Keepers, we're not going to cover the fixture stuff, but for you, Dan, I mean, I know we're both big fans of it. Are there any sort of particular keepers that sort of jump out to you for Jeepers Keepers?
Brought him in on the this week, Johansson, basically because the save points are 3 points per save. We've had not so much in it with a Jeepers keeper when we played the boost, but there was a game last year when it was Johansson. He
Yeah.
made 10 saves in a game, and that's 30 points just like that. Even if they concede 3 or 4 goals, it's massive. So saves are the main thing. And then you probably got to look at a team that'll have a lot of shots as well. So sort of mixing them in. Um, from what I looked at, Dieng wasn't a good option. He's my other goalie. So nearer the time, if there's like a standout one and it looks obvious, then I might make the transfer, but you might not. But we've seen things where even like a P roller counts as a save,
Yeah.
and it's like when a couple of years at Fodringham, he
Yeah.
made loads of saves, but it was
Like
never
4 of them were
anything
like
called.
just dribbled through to him, and
Yeah,
like a couple of people were on him, and it was sort of celebrating the saves.
yeah. So
But yeah, just briefly in this, I was just looking up who the top keepers are for saves per game.
yeah,
Following the most recent set of games, Victor Johansson is top of the list, 4 saves per game. Unfortunately, second place is Mark Travers, who isn't around anymore. He's gone.
Bonham's cheaper.
Yeah, but Jack Bonham isn't
He
making
doesn't
the
save
saves
though,
that
does
Mark
he?
Travers is making. At 3.5, interestingly, both Blackburn goalkeepers that have played this season average 3.5 saves per game.
They concede a lot of XG,
Yeah,
surprisingly, Blackburn.
Pears and Walstead both average 3.5 saves per game. Begovic also averages 3.5 saves per game. At 3.4, you have John Ruddy. And then 3.3, you have Connor Hazard, who's obviously not playing, but it gives you an idea of the sort of range for Cooper.
Super, yeah.
And then Hladky at 3.2, for those who still have Hladky. And then Rushworth and Allsup at 3.1. And to round out the top half, everyone who's averaging 3 saves or more per game, you've got Bialkowski at Millwall and O'Leary at Bristol City. All of those are averaging basically between 3 and 4 saves per game. Now, you think that's an extra 9 to 12 points per game is the average. So you're hoping for a bit more there, but just sort of gives you an idea. That's a sort of the average game for them is giving you 9 to 12 extra points.
And it's so easy to prepare for this
Yeah,
boost as well. There's no
because you don't even
preparation.
really need to prepare for it.
No,
As
you
long as you've
don't.
got 2 playing keepers, you can actually just find a week where they've got a decent week. I would throw out there, we've talked about weather. The team most affected by any potential weather postponements is Rotherham. The other keeper that I just wanted to mention for this, purely because of the upside, is Anthony Patterson is a very good penalty goalkeeper. So you're not necessarily going to get as many saves, but just if you're shooting for the moon, Anthony Patterson has a very good record against penalties.
Oh, we
Um,
know what's going to happen. Someone's going to pick him and get a save, and
yeah,
that's 10 points.
yeah. Also, for people like me who are on Cooper, of course, he had a penalty save this weekend. That would have been 10 points. And you think about it, they've conceded 3, and he would have hauled on the boost.
Did you see it though? It was a
Doesn't matter.
terrible penalty, terrible save, and then they obviously tapped it in. Coburn tapped it in, but yeah, that made me laugh a bit.
uh, but yeah, so that's sort of all I guess really on Jeepers Keepers. There's not too much planning that goes into it, just purely because of that element of um, just a good week for your two keepers. As you said, I think the other key is to look at the opposition, particularly if your team's playing against someone like Ipswich who have a lot of shots. That's
Yeah,
actually a good thing. The next one we're going to go to is Budget Buster. This is obviously another favourite, but it requires a lot more planning. So this is a 2.5 times multiplier to budget players. They have to be in the 11. You don't get it for the bench because this is something that comes up every time. Two things to cover off. One, it's not players on your bench. Two, it is under the price points. And it is their price at the time of the game week you play it, not what you bought or your selling price. No, it's like if you bought them at 4.7 and they're now 5.1, it doesn't matter that they're not eligible. So goalkeepers priced under 5.0, defenders priced under 5.0, midfielders priced under 6.5, and forwards priced under 7. Again, I haven't done too much looking into particular game weeks because I think it depends sort of the players you want to go for as well. I don't know what you have on this, Dan, whether there's any sort of players you want to talk about or just anything about the boost itself.
as you mentioned, this is quite hard to prepare for, but the upside can be massive. Um, it was last year was easier because one, the set of boosts we had, and it also um, was in the third set where it was in a double as well. So um, that's something to bear in mind. We were look sort of discussing it, and I think forwards is not going to be a problem with the forwards. You got the Ipswich guys, Coburn, Plymouth. There's enough options. Midfielders, you've got players like Philogene at Hull. Obviously, these are all depending on um, your your fixtures and things like that. We mentioned Azaz, um, Myoshi, Bell, Brooks. A lot of the mid-table sides have options in this region, so it's going to be on fixture specifically. I know last year I had a couple of Swansea players who I
Yeah,
don't think I've ever contemplated what Cooper. I've never contemplated, and the way it's going, I'll probably never pick them again either. But
yeah,
it, this is one of the reasons we like this boost because it makes you pick players that theory you would never pick. This was the famous Bradshaw
yeah.
where basically whatever strategy were you on, you either had Tom Bradshaw. Did he get? Was it 3 goals, 4 goals?
I think it was 4 returns, I want to say, but
Yeah,
it
he
might
got
have
a
been
hat trick.
3.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really fun. I think the defenders might be a bit of an issue. Um, there's not many great ones, so you're gonna have to punt. So probably be a three at the back formation when you play it. Um, any players you would suggest defensively, Angus? I did mention Vanderberg at
Yeah,
Middlesbrough if he's still in.
yeah. If he's still in, I think that's one you would leave to the week, especially because he's 4.9. You just
Yeah.
need him to get like 10-pointer in the wrong week, and all of a sudden, he's not usable. It's some of these boring ones, Wolfenden at Ipswich.
Matty Pearson, Huddersfield,
Yeah, he's another
Goldfriend.
4.9, so that's another one you'd
Yeah.
probably leave. Um,
The
Plymouth
one I
defense,
liked,
maybe.
the one I liked was
Yeah,
Huggins from Sunderland. He's
yeah.
4'6",
You'd
and
want to know he's going to keep the place ahead of Sirkin,
yeah,
but that's sort of almost the standout one in that if he has the spot. Um, Otherwise, you're looking at. I mean, I'll say him again, Cohen Bramall. Just depending on the
yeah.
particular week, someone like that. Someone like Kakai, if it's the right week.
So he didn't start, did he, at the
No,
weekend?
but just as in
It
some of these
can.
players that aren't necessarily from the best teams, where it's or some of the bad teams, where it's just like, yeah, but if you pick a week where they're playing another bad team,
I went double Birmingham last year in Budget
yes,
Buster, and they were
yes, the the
absolutely
the, the
terrible.
Birmingham double, I remember it, yes. And I think it did decently in the week of. I think some of us went the week before, and they had a horrible
Yes.
week, and then they did decently on the Budget Buster itself. But yeah, um, so yeah, there's some options around, like if you get to that point, for example, and Brandon Williams is out, Harry Clark is 4.6, so it's things like that that can sort of fall for you as well defensively.
So
Um,
we're going to get this question about overhauling in and out of
yeah,
Budget Buster. With this set of boosts,
yeah,
would you recommend it?
I'd really try and avoid it.
Yeah.
Um, I'd certainly say my personal preference, and it's my preference every time with Budget Buster, I would rather overhaul in than out. And it's more just like you get to, have the players up until basically the week before, you get rid of them, and then you can start getting them back straight away. Um, I think it helps you maximize the Budget Buster itself to overhaul in. That's just my personal preference. Some people prefer to move there. I also think, whereas you're going to have to take this staggered approach of selling players, like when do you sell, say, Dewsbury Hall, when do you sell, Piero or Rutter or whoever. If you overhaul in, you can have all those players up until the game week you overhaul, and then get them back essentially right away. But that's just the
Yeah.
way I look at it. Some people prefer to fix their team right away. Um, I think there's the three
Jeep-
boosts here: Jeepers Keepers,
Yeah.
Budget Buster, and Follow the Leader, that we're all going to want to use. And so I think if you have to sacrifice one, then
Is it Jeepers Keepers?
I think it probably is, given that it's single. And I
Yeah.
think the power of Follow the Leader and Budget Buster are the two where it's like, I really want to play this. Jeepers Keepers we love, and we know the potential upside there, particularly because it's both keepers. So when you're thinking, oh yeah, but it's like 12 to 15 points per keeper. Well, if you get that, which is fine, that's 30 points. Like,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I think it would probably be the one that you would sacrifice to overhaul, but I'd try and avoid it.
Yeah. I
In
think I
terms of some
agree.
forwards for this, I know we've sort of covered some of them, but just um, I thought it was quite interesting, some of the forward options. I think that will actually be one for Budget Buster where it will be tough to decide
Yeah.
almost, because you've got Whitaker, you've got Chaplin, you've got Broadhead, you've got, we have to say it, Liam Delap, but you've got Coburn, you've got Jay Stansfield.
Stansfield. Yeah.
Um, so I think actually that's going to be the one where it's going to be, I mean, I'm bringing him up again, Will Keane, depending on the week. Players like that, Osmajic at
Yeah.
Preston,
He's doing
he's
Yeah.
doing well. If you get the right week for someone like Cardiff, someone like Ugbo, there's quite a few options there. So I think that's actually going to be interesting in terms of, and that's where it will depend almost on the week, because you've got so many options there, particularly compared to some years where it's like, oh yeah, we have to sort of move away from these incredible forwards to get these. Obviously Rutter and Armstrong are doing well at the moment, but you've probably got at least one forward that qualifies for it in your regular team anyway. So that's
Yeah.
probably easier actually. Is the forward area in particular. But yeah, so it's sort of it creates interesting strategy options. As we've sort of said, forwards, great. Midfielders, there's plenty of options. Defence, you're going to struggle. Keepers, not really a problem. Most people are probably on a keeper that qualifies anyway. But it's more around the strategy, I think, for that, and looking at when you want to play it, depending on sort of various issues. But I do think it's an interesting one, and it's a fun one. And we talk about, say you have sort of just to give an example, say you have a defender who keeps a clean sheet and does nothing else. That's a 15-pointer on Budget Buster.
Yeah, it's huge.
Um,
Hits are, even if we've seen 12, 16s in game weeks
yeah,
for
and pay
Budget
and that
Buster.
pay off big as
Yeah,
well. So yeah, the high probably the highest upside boost, and obviously it's one that we've enjoyed in the past, and so I do think it's it's one to certainly consider. The final one, which I think was it the first time it was in the game last season,
yeah.
which
They
was
had it last year and then in
that
the
was
World Cup game, didn't they?
the Sheffield United double where they beat Burnley and then
Lost to
lost to
Rotherham.
Rotherham, and that was where people had some combination of McBurney, Ndiaye, Ahmedhodzic.
Mortgage.
Uh,
Egan.
some people had Egan and Ahmedhodzic returned and Egan didn't, and that was sort of one of the swings. Uh, or some people I think had Egan, Ahmedhodzic, and Ndiaye and didn't have McBurney, and that was the sort of
Yeah,
swing. But yeah, so just to clarify, so with the captain on this game, they score 2.5 times points, and everyone else from that same team scores double points. The vice captain scores double points, and everyone else from their team scores 1.5 times their points. And the emergency captain scores 1.5 times, and so did the players from their team. So really what you're looking at there is 3 triple ups. And then it's sort of priority orders, which is interesting because it's twofold. It's both the player that you want to be most multiplied, but also their teammates, because I
yeah,
think that creates some interesting situations. Like for example, Dewsbury Hall. Dewsbury Hall is great, and you might well have Leicester on your. The other Leicester players aren't scoring as well, so do you then maybe look to give someone else the captaincy because of the 3 players combined and give Dewsbury Hall something slightly lower, or do you sort of just go with him having the highest multiplier and sort of just deal with the knock on, which I think is an interesting sort of calculation to make. I don't know what your thoughts are on well, just the boost itself, really.
it's great, the boost. It's also one of these which is not terribly hard to put together in a short space of time. Obviously, um, you normally want to put it on the better sides, and you normally have you probably won't have triple ups on all them, but you'll probably likely have 4 or 5 from or 6 from the 9 players you need anyway. So it's always interesting to, as you mentioned, unless they're a really good shout, because Dewsbury Hall is such a good option, but Mavadidi's probably the second best. But who do you go for the third best? What, Pereira, or
Yeah,
do you take
so
the
I
punt
actually had
on
a
the
look
ad?
at this. This is the one boost I've actually done a little bit of research into,
Yeah,
in part because I was just sort of interested by this one. So I'm just looking at my notes. The one thing I'll mention for because people were wondering about it in terms of the Carabao Cup, because obviously Middlesbrough could be impacted by that. The semi-finals are 2 legs. If they do get through, midweeks don't clash with any games. final, if they got to that, is game week 34, so it doesn't affect this set at all. But in terms of the weeks for this, or no, actually, I looked up some of the highest scoring triple ups, and in terms of just taking the 3 highest scorers from a team, Leicester did have the highest score. It's obviously largely boosted by Dewsbury Hall, but that was Dewsbury Hall, Mavididi, and Hermansen. Now,
Wow,
yeah,
the goalie. No
obviously,
one's going the goalie, are they? Though
you're not going to go the goalie. You might go the goalie if you have, say, the emergency, where I think if you happen to have, say, you're on. I'm just trying to think. I mean, I brought up the Patterson example with Sunderland, but even if you're on Ipswich, particularly, like, you might say, "Oh, I've got Hladky, but I'm going to use the emergency on them and just have him be the
yeah,
keeper." That's it. It's not the end of the world. But Hermansen has 74 points. I think the next highest was Pereira, who's 70. But it's close between their defenders. You've got him on 70, Fass and Vestergaard on 69. So it's sort of like you'd probably go a defender. There's no one else really that close. Interestingly, Iheanacho has 60 points, but you wouldn't follow the leader on him unless Vardy got injured. So they have the highest in terms of just taking the highest scoring triple up. The next is Sunderland.
Ooh, I wouldn't have thought that.
It is significantly boosted,
Oh,
obviously, by Jack Clark with 124. The other 2 in that are Dan Neil and Anthony Patterson, with Trey
couldn't go
Hume
with him.
narrowly out of it, which is probably where you would more look. If particularly someone like me, I have Hume and Clark. Sunderland obviously a
Yeah,
massive option with having those 2. You add
Roberts would be
Roberts
my
most
one.
likely, could be Bellingham, for example. So I think that's one that jumps out. The next highest scoring, just behind Sunderland, is Leeds, and it's the Somerville James Rutter trio.
Would you go 3 attacking, or because remember you got to have 3 triple ups,
Yeah,
so eventually you got to pick some defenders
yeah, and
in
that's the
some of
thing
these, right?
where I think obviously you look at that and that's what you want. That's almost what you'd want for your captaincy is
Yeah,
Somerville, James, and Rutter. I think odds are you'd probably end up with someone like a Sam Byram or Pascal Strauch or someone like that. Well, those 2 because they're
and between
5.5. Um, that you might end up with them. I'd probably still just go with Rutter, James, and Somerville, or say Somerville, Rutter, and Pirro. I'd want the 3
yeah,
attackers from Leeds. I'd find my defenders from someone else. I'd get my 3 Leeds attackers, I think is the way I'd look at it.
you probably only need one defender though, because you could just play 3-4-3 and have midfielders and attackers from
Yeah.
other teams.
Um, the interesting one. So people talk about, say, Ipswich, Plymouth. Some people have talked about Norwich. I'm not having the Norwich one, but it's because people are already on Stacey Rowe and Sarah. In terms of points scored this season, Stacey Rowe and Sarah would be outscored if you had triple Cardiff defence.
Wow.
If you had Ng, McGuinness, and Gutas, those 3 combined have scored more points than Stacey Rowe and Sarah combined.
You need to start playing Collins, Angus.
Yes, I know. The funny thing is, he's got Norwich this week. But yeah, that was sort of the big one. They have combined for 255 points this season. Those
It's
3.
just gone completely under the radar apart from NG.
Perry Ng is the top scoring defender. 5th and 6th for defenders are McGuinness and Gutas. Collins, who hasn't even played every game, I don't think, is on 66. He's on the same as Hume and Ampadu, and he's the 4th
Yeah.
highest scoring Cardiff defender. We've talked about Cardiff defensively, but it's just, and that's something. I'm not saying, oh yeah, get triple Cardiff defense on your follow the leader, but it's just to show that you can get points from a variety of places. And particularly, say,
Yeah.
if Cardiff had an attacker that you liked, you could have, say, double defence and an attacker from them, and it could go really well for you. And then obviously you've got the likes of Plymouth, of Ipswich, and Southampton is probably the other one that we need to mention. Adam Armstrong, Walker Peters, and then you find a third player. I think that's the big thing with them. I'm not sure you'd go Bree at the moment because you sort of feel Bree's got the spot, but at any point it could be Manning's spot again. Maybe go someone like Sulemana, or Stuart Armstrong. He's on a lot of the set pieces. He's playing every game. It's not the most exciting pick, but particularly, when you're talking about like your Clarks, your Dewsbury Halls, your Armstrongs, your Somervilles, you need to find someone who's slightly cheaper.
Is it weird I was more excited by the Cardiff triple up than Southampton?
No, because the Cardiff triple up is just like the best thing I've found. I was so excited when I saw that they'd outscored the Norwich triple up. So I think that sort of paints a bit of a picture in terms of weeks for it.
What about Blackburn out of interest, Angus?
So I didn't look at Blackburn. I will admit to that now.
You're on the spot there.
You've obviously got Rankin Costello.
Spotty.
Let me just work this out. So the top scorers would be Smodix, Rankin Costello, and Britton. And they would slot in behind all of those teams I've mentioned. So I think yes, okay. So maybe if it balances out, where that's giving you two defenders, if you like, as in you'd likely go Rankin, Costello, Britton, and Smodix. That if you're looking for defenders, that might help you that way. But obviously we've got the Rankin Costello injury now.
Yeah.
So I think if Rankin Costello was still play, like as in were fit, I think Rankin Costello Smodix +1, whether that's Britton, Dolan, whatever, that would be really interesting. Now it feels slightly less so. Is the one issue there? In terms of some weeks for it, funnily enough, some of the best weeks I could find are the next 3 weeks.
Oh, Lord.
So just to reel off some of the games from game week 16, Ipswich are at home against Swansea. Leeds are at home against Plymouth. Southampton are at home against West Brom, which isn't the best game, but it's not sort of terrible. Sunderland are at home against Birmingham. And just for Jamie, Watford are at home against Rotherham. I know Jamie's already on double, so just throwing it out there. Follow the leader. Game week 17, Leeds are at Rotherham. Leicester play Watford. Norwich do play QPR. Southampton are at Huddersfield, and Sunderland are at Plymouth. Game week 18, which is one I really liked until I realised an issue with it, which has Blackburn against Birmingham, Ipswich against Millwall, Leeds against Swansea, Leicester at Sheffield Wednesday, Southampton play Bristol City, and Sunderland play Huddersfield. That sounds great. That's the midweek of a 3-game week.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. So that sort of puts me off. Then there's 3 that I thought of that are later. So one that could go either way with game week 23 by that point is Birmingham at Plymouth. You've then got Leicester against Rotherham, Norwich against Huddersfield, Southampton at QPR, Sunderland play Coventry. Game week 25, Birmingham again, just as a potential option at that point. Play Bristol City, Ipswich play QPR, Leicester play Cardiff, Boro play Huddersfield, Southampton play Plymouth, and Sunderland play Rotherham. And then game week 26, Blackburn play Rotherham, particularly Rankin Costello is back, say then. We don't know the timeline on him, but that's obviously nice. Ipswich play Stoke, Leeds play Birmingham, Leicester play Huddersfield, Southampton play Norwich, and Sunderland play Preston. So I've given you quite a few game weeks there with just games in, which I think shows there's only so much you have to plan for it, which is what we said at the start. You obviously have to work out when you want to play it because you'll have to make transfers towards it. But I think it shows that there's a range of game weeks there that you can play it in, which is obviously the main thing. But that those game weeks do also start right away.
Also, the interesting thing is last year because it was it in a double. It was in a double last year, so it sort of forces people to play the boost then. But if there's no obvious doubles, people will play it in different weeks, have different teams, have different combinations. It really should be a massive differential boost. Well, you'll get like a high variety of scores. So yeah,
Yeah,
I haven't got a clue. I need to sit down
yeah.
and
But
work
but
that out
I
drastically.
think I just wanted to paint the picture that literally from this week, the options are there for follow the leader depending on how your team is set
You'd
up.
look, and I'm nowhere near. I probably need
Yeah,
to get 4 or 5 players
yeah.
in. I think.
But even obviously after this week we have the international break. Even from straight after the international break, you can be looking at it. And the beauty with this is you can go with like almost any team within reason, but there's a range of teams depending on how you're set up. Like a lot of people have triple Ipswich. Well, there's a start for you, and you can just find weeks that go
Yeah.
with that and everything. So yeah, so hopefully that sort of gives lots of people food for thought. It's something that I'll be looking at. I haven't really thought about the boosts until today when I did some of this research, but it's something that I will be thinking about moving forward. We've had a few questions. We've had 5 questions, so we'll just finish off with those. Um, First one is from Jordan Williams, who's asked, follow the leader. Should I pull the trigger when I've got 9 players from top 3 teams? Instead of overthinking to try and plan for a future week, I'd be going Ampadu, Somerville, Rutter, captain, Hladky, Davis, Chaplin, vice captain, Fass, Justin, Dewsbury, Hall, emergency captain, but also tempted to go the extra Leicester mid for -4. Um, I mean, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it does, especially if you don't have to really build towards it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd certainly be tempted to move to a mid from the double Leicester defence because you're not really getting any bonus or anything from the Leicester defence. Someone like a Mavadidi. Mavadidi's the obvious one that jumps out in terms of
And
making that
also, again,
move.
I know it's away. If it is this week, away to Borough, but Borough aren't going to defend. It's going to be
Yeah,
quite an open game. I thought.
yeah. Like I'd back Borough to score in that game, but I think Leicester could get a few going the other way.
Yeah.
Um, that's maybe the one slight concern. That's not necessarily the best fixture, but it could still go well, and you're putting the lowest armband on them as well. So um, I'd
For a -4, I
uh,
think I'd be tempted to do that.
yeah, I think I'd take the hit for the midfielder, but I certainly can't argue with playing it on those teams right away.
Yeah.
FPL Frog, what new and spectacular ways will Norwich find to disappoint me this week? In an entirely unrelated question, which 3 Cardiff assets would you take a -8 to get in this week? Perry and G, Mark McGuinness, well, Jamilo Collins, but like,
I mean, you'd want an attacking one, wouldn't
yeah,
you? It'll
uh,
put. I
um,
feel sorry. You know when your team's conceding
yeah,
loads of goals, and it can't be nice for Frog, FPL Frog, to watch it with you guys.
yeah, I was about to say, watching it, particularly with Darren, who is a Blackburn fan, and just sort of
Yeah.
feeling that, just sort of what your team is doing to you. But yeah, it's tough to identify an attacking player. Is the problem? Maybe Jamie's old friend Bowler.
Do we know who's on pens? Is it Carlin Grant?
I want to say it's like Rawls,
We can't go rules.
which you're not going to go with, which is why I say someone like Bowler. Um, I mean, you surely can't be advising anyone goes Carl and Grant. Uh,
Yeah, but he's not playing for West Brom now, so
that's
it's a
that's
bit
true. It's
different
all
now.
fine. But yeah, maybe an attacker. Otherwise, yeah, just hammer into the defense. It's clearly the lesson. Um, And I think that in terms of the new and spectacular ways Norwich will find to disappoint you this week, I think it's not sacking Neil Wagner, David Wagner even. But
Neil Wagner, who's
yeah,
he? His brother.
yeah, not sacking David Wagner when everyone thought that they were going to sack David Wagner. That's the real one.
It's so weird though, because last year he came in, done very well. They were scoring for fun, and then it basically ended up like it is now. And he done exactly the same at the start of this season, and now it's
Mm.
gone exactly the same way. So
Yeah, I mean, I know the
don't know.
strikers are out, but it just looks bad everywhere. Um, the good
Just
news is they've got
defensively is
Grant
the
Hanley to
problem.
come back, so that's going to help. 80 Tour has asked, with Breeze starting games, is he worth bringing in if Rankin Costello is ruled out? Um, I said he's one I've considered. I'm actually slightly short once I bring in Rutter. I'm bringing Rutter straight back. The one thing I would say is we're starting to appreciate, just it's difficult with Southampton in terms of the players they have for the bonus, but his bonus is much worse now. He's not on any set pieces.
Not winning just 1-0 every
Yeah,
game week.
exactly. So I think if you want that second Southampton defender, then sure. But as we said, I do think, particularly because Ryan Manning was Russell Martin's guy, at any moment it could sort of just go back to Ryan Manning. FF Deacon, way too early to plan this, but which three teams would you be eyeing up on follow the leader? For me, Leeds and Ipswich look fairly certain, but the third may be a little trickier. Um,
I think I would want Leeds and Ipswich, and then whoever you decide a week with those two, and whoever is who you like. It might be Borough, it might be Sunderland, it might be Cardiff defence. Um, you go from, and then you could either keep like a Dewsbury Hall still in there, or someone like that.
yeah, I think for me, the two that I've identified personally are Leeds and Sunderland, and so Ipswich
It's
might be the
really
third
interesting.
there,
I've not considered Sunderland at
um,
all.
but that's
I know
partially
Jack
part
Clark
because of
is there.
Jack Clark, but also because I already have Hume, and I'm painfully aware of how many points Hume has because I keep benching him as well.
You should just play Hume and Collins for about 4 game weeks,
Yeah,
Angus, and see how that goes.
yeah, just play the defenders that score points. It's
Take out Davis. He's only got 1 point of this. Take him out.
Can you imagine if he gets injured tomorrow? The sort of just
That's it.
what people will do. Like,
7th.
but yeah, I think it's a case of just deciding like one, maybe two teams, whether that's Leeds, Ipswich, Sunderland, Southampton, Cardiff, and less. Well, yeah, um, and you find a week for those, and then you find your third team, and it might be based on players you've already got, or it might be okay, I've got one player and I can get the other two, something like that.
Looking forward to Danny McDonald playing it with Hull.
Twine, Philogene, and Aaron Connolly, and getting like 60 points or something.
Yeah.
uh, and Petri Annanen has our last question, which is when do you expect the next doubles? If no matches are rearranged to weather, etc., or surprises, will there be doubles in game week 16 to 30 with our current knowledge? As covered at the start, highly unlikely.
Just one thing. If the teams know they've got a fixture in for the fourth round, can they move fixtures forward or fit things in?
So, for example, if teams if teams get knocked out, or if teams
So
go
if they go through, if
if
they
they go
go through
through?
to the fourth round, they obviously blank in
Yeah,
20 odd.
29.
Will will they because they'll know they haven't got a fixture? Can they rearrange that game? Say game week 28 or
No,
30. Is that? That's
No,
not
so
possible.
we did sort of entertain this last year, and it didn't happen in terms of they could theoretically do it sort of the midweek either side, and they didn't. Um, so I mean, there's a very very small chance that they could, but realistically
Keep
they wouldn't.
keepers in my
Um,
back pocket.
yeah, but the other thing to bear in mind there in terms of the blank, which obviously will be game week 29, is you do occasionally get teams with moving games into that game week. That
Yeah,
tends to happen more with prior postponements, which we haven't had in this case. There's a very small chance they could move games, but I don't think so, because even last year we were sitting with other postponed games that got moved into that game week with teams that were knocked out. So it's unlikely that there'll be any sort of, other than blanking in 29, I don't think there'll be many fixture changes pending weather. That's everything. We will be back on Sunday. I think it's just
I
Sunday.
think it's Friday, Saturday, isn't it, this week?
Yeah, so we'll be back as normal. We're not going to do anything following the Rotherham Ipswich game, in part just because we've done this and there's going to be limited points, sort of just covering that game. So yeah, thank you all for listening, and we will speak to you again soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.